pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Friday, November 10th, 2017. Joining us to talk about the U.S. Women's National Team versus the Canadian Women's National Team in Vancouver last night, Gavin Day. Gavin, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Good. Gavin, before we start into that, I just quickly, because we're a tight show today, and I wanted to just rave about how awesome the World Cup ball is for next year. I've so wanted a black and white checkerboard pattern for so long. It's perfect. Anyway, I wanted to get that out there. It's the best design ever. Gavin, let's go to last night, though. We were talking, during the game, we were back channel talking a little bit, and we sort of have the same perspective on this. And I think we both kind of agree, and I don't want to speak for you, but I agree anyway, that they played well last night, but ultimately there's still not a result at the end of the day. A draw, but not a win. What will it take for Canada to finally break through and defeat the United States for the first time in 16 years?
You know what? I don't know. I mean, if they couldn't get a result last night, when they deserved one, they really did. I don't know what it's going to take, because I mean, everything there was the combination of just about everything going Canada's way last night. You know, they had a few players step up. You look at Jessie Fleming, Adriana Leon. They had a home crowd. They had a U.S. team that was quite poor in a lot of areas, and it was a U.S. team that's looked very human this season, and yet they still couldn't get a result. And so, I mean, they sounded very happy. It looked like on the West Coast they were all very happy with going out and getting a tie. But if you can't get a result at home on a night like that, then what's it going to take?
Well, and let's go there. They did. They're excited. And I saw some American women's followers that I have there that were sort of making fun of that. It's like they were calling, a Canadian win, or like Canada wins 1-1 or things like that. Like, is there a problem? Is it problematic that they're so excited by a draw? Should they not have been disappointed? Should they not have been angry that they didn't get the job done? Yeah,
I mean, you sort of look at they still have a second game against the same U.S. side, and it's going to be in the U.S. It's going to be on natural grass. We, of course, know how reticent the U.S. is to playing on artificial turf. And, I mean, I don't want to say the word celebrate. They were very pleased. They weren't celebrating. They were very, very pleased with a tie at home with a home crowd behind them. And so I don't know if it's the psyche of the Canadian program where that feels like a win, but you haven't beaten them yet. And that's what you want to do more than anything. You keep talking about this rivalry, and if you still want to call it a rivalry, you have to win a game at some point. You can't just rely on you once had a classic encounter 5 years ago and, geography. That's not a basis for a rivalry. And so, I mean, you look at England, France, Australia all beat the U.S. this season. If you really want to say you're one of the best teams and all that, you have to pick up a win too.
When we're looking at the game last night, Gavin, we're what, like 18 months away from the 2019 Women's World Cup. Did we learn anything last night heading to the World Cup in 18 months?
I think if Adriana Leon can play like that on a regular basis, I think she has no worries of getting dropped from the roster anytime soon. I think she did look very good after her introduction. Jessie Fleming, I think, is here to stay. She's been showing, the quality that we all knew was coming out from her. And then there are the mainstays, your Christine Sinclair, your Desiree Scott. I don't think they're going to go anywhere anytime soon. But sort of the main story we've seen with this program is there's sort of this revolving door of, 16, 17, 18-year-old players that have come in and out, and it's, there is still a year and a half. There's probably a year until qualifying itself, maybe a little less than that now. But it's a matter of who else is going to take those spots. And undoubtedly there are a lot of younger players coming in, but just which ones will assume those roster spots, those spots 12 through 18 are still very, very much in the air, and that's I guess what we'll see coming up in the next less than a year or so.
When we're looking at last night's game, and it's been a few years, I was actually looking at old tweets last night, Gavin. I know I shouldn't do that, but I was looking at old tweets, and I was seeing people talking about Jessie Fleming, and Mallory Pugh. And I'm wondering, now, like a year and a half later than those tweets I was reading, we have those two grown a bit more, become a bit better, and seems like Jessie Fleming got the little go-ahead in the development race. What would you say? How would you compare those two players? It's like the best prospect of each team for the future. How would you compare Jessie Fleming to Mallory Pugh?
Yeah, I mean, I am such a fan of Jessie. I was still with Canada Soccer when she was at the Under-17 Women's World Cup in Costa Rica, and this quiet, shy little player, but she's such a dynamo even back then, and she's just grown so much, and she is, on the field, talented player, off the field, a very bright, smart young woman who's at UCLA. I wrote a piece for Sportsnet earlier this season where, I looked at a bit her and Pugh made the decision to jump to the professional ranks, and Jessie is a student very much as well as an athlete, and I don't think she wants to leave school anytime soon. She says it's cool to maybe have that option if she wanted to go pro, but she's liking life in school, and yeah, I mean, for her, she's found a place where she's comfortable on the West Coast there in California, and she goes about her business. And I mean, I think Pugh's hurt. Pugh's not available for this, and it would have been a good sort of test of where the two are. But I like that Jessie is taking her time, not rushing into the professional game, and yeah, I agree with you. I think she is that little bit of a step ahead right now, and we'll see. It's really sort of a litmus test of where their choices will lead them. One goes pro, one stays in school, and we'll see what happens over the next 2 years, because we've got a long time to see how this plays out.
Yeah, a couple of observations about Fleming last night, and I thought that was one of her better games I've ever seen her play for the national teams, and she's been a good player even at a young age. I like that there was a point where she was yelling at the referee. I'm going to be careful with that, but that shows that she's a little more confident out there now. And she looked, I'm going to say this carefully, she physically looks more like a woman now than she did before. And I think that's going to be important, that physicality level. It has to get up and reach that elite status with the best athletes in the world out there, because the women's game is very athletic. What is her ceiling in your mind? That said, and I don't know whether you agree with what I said or not, but that's my take. But what is her absolute ceiling? Can she be maybe even the best player in the world in 10 years?
Well, with Jessie, I mean, you mentioned the body type. When she entered the national program, she was still a long-distance runner as much as she was a soccer player. And she'll be the first to say that when she's sort of made that focus to stick with soccer, and, she goes into the gym working with the sports scientist and all that, she did sort of change her composition, and she is still growing and I think still changing in that way. And just the ceiling that, she has that vision, which I don't think you can really teach. And the stronger she is on the ball, she'll never be a tall player, but she'll use her strengths and her smarts and her vision. And, I don't want to put a ceiling on her just yet, because she can be one of those players that, can pop up for goals, but then also unlocks back lines with well-weighted passes and sets other players up. And it'll be great to see what she can become over a number of years.
When you're looking at, Gavin, the next few months ahead of us for the national team, what's next? It's going to get really important next year with the ramp up and the ramp up before the 2019 World Cup. What's next?
Yeah, I mean, you'll look at it. There's the youth cycle first. They just had the draw for the under-20 Women's World Cup, and we, of course, know how much John Herdman likes to throw the young players to the wolves a little bit. So we'll see what comes out of the under-20 group, if there's anyone who could be meriting a call-up, and then an under-17 cycle as well. There's actually the under 20 Women's World Cup next year as well before qualifying. So all that, and I mean, you look at, I'd imagine they'll be back in Algarve. It'll be interesting to see how the schedule is built for this Canadian team, because I don't think we know what month CONCACAF is having their tournament yet, month or where. And then, of course, it's not a home World Cup for Canada anymore, so they really have to tailor their preparations for that. Do they go play more in Europe? Do they go play in France? Do they? It'll be interesting to see how they build that calendar and everything in a preparation for, like I said, that CONCACAF women's qualifying tournament, which we still don't know where or when that is next year yet.
All right, Gavin, to wrap up with the final question, we don't want to belabor too much the results of one game, but any other, put Fleming aside, but any of the other young players really jump out at you last night as someone that you think might have a long-term, ability to play a real impact role on this team moving forward?
I think we'll really have to see Jordan Huitema, how she does in the second game. She played well against Costa Rica earlier this year, but that's Costa Rica. It was a completely lopsided couple of games there, and so we'll see if she gets more time up front in that second game, because that's going to be a real test. Because this U.S. side, it's missing a lot of big name players as well, so it's very much a test for them as well as Canada. So. I'd like to see how Huitema does with more minutes against a team like the U.S. Other than that, they went sort of regular heavy at the beginning. Deanne Rose, I'd expect more from her, but it's a chance to see how some of these younger players can bounce back. And we kind of keep coming back to what's it going to take to get a result, because it was encouraging. They looked very good, but we keep saying that. And if third place is good enough, then encouraging signs at this point is fine. But if you want to win, you have to get a result at some point.
All right, Gavin Day, Sportsnet, many other places. Thanks for your time, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, guys.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee, joining us now on the line to talk about Peru and their World Cup qualifying, Martin Montes. Martin, ¿cómo está?
Muy bien. Hi, Kevin and Duane. Pleasure to be on your show.
And this is the famous Martin Montes. I've talked about you many times on the show, and I thought we'd have you on to talk a little Peru today. Martin and I are friends, in case you don't know. But Martin, how excited are you for tonight?
Extremely. This is literally the biggest and most important game I've ever been a part of. It's amazing.
And fair enough. All right. That's before I let Kevin jump in for the next couple questions, Martin. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about this Peruvian team? Anyone who hasn't really watched them before, what to expect and who their key players are.
Well, I would say if there was like a most improved team award for the year, Peru would run away with it. They are a young team. They've got two veterans that are leading the way. Guerrero, of course, who is not going to play today. And also they got a central defender who's been around. But aside from that, this is basically 25-year-olds, 23-year-olds playing their biggest games of their lives. In terms of key players, you've got Christian Cueva, who plays in Sao Paulo. You've got left winger Flores, who plays in Aalborg. And, of course, you've got Carrillo, who plays in Watford. So those three guys are attacking midfielders, and they'll be looking for the ball and trying to do the most damage.
When you're looking, Martin, at the road to get to tonight, we had this crazy CONMEBOL qualification process over the last few months that almost saw Argentina miss out. But in that same weekend, we saw Peru sneak in at fifth and qualify for this playoff today. how did you live? How did you stay awake and not pass out of a heart attack during this whole qualification process first? But how did you experience this, the height of Peru football?
You know, it was extremely tense, and we started off, I mean, it's a very long process, right? And we started off as usual, losing on the road, tying key games at home that we should have won. I recall there was a game early on with Venezuela. Duane and I watched together, and it was a tie in Lima. And from that point on, the coach cleaned house. He just discarded a bunch of veterans that we had relied on for a long time, which is very rare. Our coach is a very strong guy. He's got a really strong character. And that changed the team. And since then, you know, little by little, we were winning and gaining more momentum. And before we could even understand what was going on, we were suddenly in the dogfight for the last 4 games. And in the 2 games just before the last 2 games, we won them both. And for the first time, we were in a qualification spot with 2 games to go. And then you're playing Argentina and Colombia, and you're just trying to hold on. You know, so it was extremely tense and really unbelievable, and in a way out of nowhere.
And let's not forget that result against Colombia, too. It was quite impressive, and I have been impressed. But listening to you, Martin, is it the rise of youth? Is it because of that change of personnel, putting a bit more trust in younger players, that their ceiling is higher, their talent ceiling is a bit higher because of player development and everything? But is it the rise of young Peruvian football players that can explain this sudden rise of Peru football?
It's definitely the faith that the coach has shown in the young players. It's funny how just in this generation that we have, there have been, like, none of the players saw the strong Peruvian teams from the 70s and the early 80s. So they're all just trying to get Peru back to that level. And you can see the desire that they play with. And, you know, in general, the Peruvian player is very undervalued on the world stage. So it's not like you can look down the list on paper and see big clubs in Europe. They play for modest teams, and they're doing an amazing job keeping up with the Suarez's and the Rodriguez and the Messis of South American football. Like, they match them game for game. And all credit to the coach, Ricardo Gareca, who has given so much, given so much faith to these players, and it's really built them up.
Martin, just to take a bit of a bigger picture thing here. It's, of course, been since 1982 since Peru has been at a World Cup, a very, very long time for a country in South America to go without going. How big would it be? What would it mean to Peruvians if this club were to make Russia?
Quite literally, it would mean everything. This is the most important thing going on in Peru. Every man, woman, and child will be watching this game in Peru, all 30 million. It's the biggest thing that's happened since the last time that they were there in 1982, and I can't be more literal about it. It is just an amazing, amazing experience that the whole country is living, and these players are giving such an amazing gift to the entire country, and with that comes all of the pressure of having a whole country on your shoulders. Like, literally the entire country is a football fan. So good luck to them. That's all I can say.
Martin, for those that don't know, is also a very hardcore voyageur. So he has lived the pain of defeat many, many times, both with Peru and Canada. So on a personal level, Martin, just how you're excited, but how much trepidation is there for going into this game in about 12 hours and 8 minutes?
No, there's a lot. Peru is definitely not used to the role of being a favorite at all. We're always the underdog. So to be a favorite going into, like, the biggest game is such a huge change for the entire team. I see this tie against New Zealand kind of the same way I would see a match between Canada and Mexico. Like, the difference is the same. But when Canada plays Mexico, I always have that belief that Canada can squeak one out and, tie a game 1-1 or win it 1-0, as we have done in the past with Mexico, especially at home. So there's no reason why New Zealand can't surprise. And they will also be playing the game of their lives, and they got a couple of good players with Chris Wood from Burnley, teammate of Arfield. So they can do their damage, and we got to just stay calm and play our game.
Well, Martin, just before Duane asks you a very important question, I have one as well. And, we've talked about the hype and the importance and everything. What if it doesn't go well tonight? What if New Zealand and the All Whites pull an upset? What does it mean? Is it going to alienate some fans of the national team? Because you give us so much, you get us so close, but then ultimately fell. How would you feel if it's not meant to be?
I'm not really entertaining that right now. Mentally, my mind can't handle it. It would be insanity in the streets of every city in Lima. It would, that's just not something that can really compute. We're, to be so close and to have fought so hard after all those grueling 18 matches in South America, to lose at the very last hurdle. I don't see that happening. But hopefully we won't even have to think about it. It would just be insanity in the streets. That's all I can say.
So Martin, let's take us ahead 12 hours from now. How will you be experiencing tonight?
Just sitting on the edge of my couch, my brother and the family, just trying to stay calm, and hopefully my heart stays in my chest. Hopefully we can control the game. I mean, I know that we will have a lot of the ball in this game. Hopefully we can hold on to it and they can't score on us. So that's it, and hopefully I survive.
All right, we hope you survive too, Martin. Montes, Martin _M113 on the Twitters. Thanks for your time, and try not to die tonight.
I'll try. Take care, guys.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. Duane, yeah, that would be interesting to watch Peru tonight. A lot of interesting one. Rarely do we get Italy in the playoff. True.
That's coming up soon, and the neighborhood I'm in is getting revved up for that one. I'll have to get my Italy stuff out so no one harasses me on the street.
Yeah, you just wear it for pure security reasons. Like, I'm just wearing Italy hat so I can get through stuff.
I do own an Italy shirt. I swear that's half the reason I own it. But it has Balotelli in the back.
That gets served quickly, more quicker when you go to like a Cafe Olimpico or something.
There you go. Thanks to Martin and to Gavin, obviously, both of those guys coming on today, and as I said, Martin and I go back a long, long time, and I've witnessed many disappointing days with Martin. I spent 8-1 with him, among many other people, but certainly.
Well, why do we keep talking about it? Why do we keep bringing it back to that? We should move on.
Yeah, well, it's hard to move on from that, but nonetheless. So I am cheering for that. If Peru makes the World Cup, I will adopt them as my team because of my friendship with Martin and a few other Peruvians that I do have just by happenstance have gotten to know over the years through TFC and through Canada. So I wish them well tonight. And there is a viewing down by me that I'm going to try and get into. I'm going to be the only English guy there, I think. But nonetheless, that'll be fun.
Yeah, good thing you corrected yourself. You were going a different route. Yeah, only English person there.
There you go. I will be the only English first speaking language. Anyway, let's just shut up before I get myself in trouble.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. No. Italy today. That is a big one. That's an interesting one too because Italy has not been all that impressive in qualifying, and they do have this tendency to sort of have like 3 good cycles and 1 bad cycle. If you look at Italy's history, and I'm wondering. With the Sweden team, that's interesting for sure.
Yeah,
whether or not
interesting. Yeah, not as interesting if Zlatan would be there, but it's pretty interesting. But you know what? There's even rumblings that if Sweden gets past Italy today, Zlatan might come back for the World Cup next year. I think he just didn't want to do with the qualifiers like most players.
I would be shocked if Zlatan did not unretire if Sweden does qualify for the World Cup. Sweden, if you look at the pre-tournament or pre-qualifying sort of speculation, they weren't really considered a favorite to get there. So Zlatan steps aside if they manage to get there. The question would be whether they'd want him at that point, and that sounds a bit absurd. But
yeah, true.
But if you've got a core group that have qualified you there, then you parachute in a guy of that ego at an advanced age, whether or not that would be the best choice of action for that. And I think a lot of Swedish people might argue that it's the wrong way to go. Exciting weekend. The World Cup, the international break is often a bit of a letdown sometimes, but I think this one's going to be exciting because the playoffs always are. And we haven't touched.
This is the only one every 4 years that's actually fun. We've been covering MLS and MLS playoffs for a while, and this is the only time where that break during the MLS playoff between the semifinals and the conference finals doesn't bother me. Once every 4 years, we get actual meaningful games that decide who goes to the World Cup. Once every 4 years, just in the middle of MLS playoffs, this break, this weekend is not the worst one. Last year, the years before, were the worst ones.
Well, precisely. And obviously, we've got this far, and we haven't talked about Honduras, Australia yet either, and I think maybe we'll wrap quickly with that.
So speaking of that 8-1,
yeah, there you go.
How many Canadian fans will become Aussie fans tonight?
I suspect most. I have an Australian jersey that I might actually wear out tonight, so there you go. Not that I'm necessarily I've never been a basher of. It's not their fault that we crapped the bed.
It's not their fault we couldn't save that ball,
Yeah. Nonetheless, it is hard to cheer for your rivals, and Honduras is certainly a country that has developed over the Canadian fans and developed a rivalry over the few years. So I think, and plus, because of the Commonwealth and a lot of shared history and stuff like that, I think there's a natural inclination for Canadians to sort of cheer for Aussies anyway. But
my sister-in-law lives in Australia now, so I'm cheering for Australia.
Yeah, nonetheless. So we'll see. Look, like I said, this is a fun international break in terms of having the playoff. It's exciting to see, do or die sort of games for big clubs, especially the European side. I will be making a point this afternoon. I'm gonna, this is my day off, so I'm gonna cut it off short to get out and watch the Italy game. I'm pretty excited to watch that one, and then hopefully I'll be able to watch the Peruvian game tonight, and we'll go from there. But gonna be a fun time. But then we'll be back geared up for playoffs after this international break, and we'll have lots to talk about that in the days ahead. But those days do not include tomorrow and Sunday because we deserve a day off. And on that note, Kevin, say goodbye.
You can always follow Duane on Twitter. Like if you're watching the new videos now, this video should be fine, by the way, better than yesterday's. At 24th Minute for Duane, at Kevin Laramee for myself, and the show at Soccer Today SPN. Stay tuned. Monday, we'll be back with all the ramifications of the World Cup qualifiers of the weekend. We'll know who takes part of the World Cup, and we'll get ready for the upcoming World Cup draw very soon, too. But as always, until Monday, I'm Kevin Laramee, and have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.